Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter podcast. I am your host, Antrice Wood, and we are right smack dab in the middle of our series on the Create Spiral, which is a growth path for artists. And this is something that I designed, and it just makes sense to me. So I wanted to share it with all of you. If you haven't listened to the other episodes, it's okay. You can keep listening. Your understanding of these concepts is not dependent upon hearing the other two episodes. So you are absolutely good to go. So if you have ever gotten excited about an idea, followed a spark of curiosity maybe, and then hit a wall of resistance, you've already experienced the first two phases of the spiral. But if you made it past that bit, you probably landed in the phase we're going to talk about today, which is experimentation. And spoiler alert, this is the part where things usually look not so great, kind of in the messy middle. So today we're going to talk about why that's not a problem and why that messy middle, or the ugly phase as some people call it, is something that you can look forward to, maybe even celebrate. So this phase, experimentation, is also where we spend the most time inside of Growth Studio, especially in the critiques, because this is where you really start becoming the artist that you want to be. This is the place where you really start to get to know yourself. You really start to gain that confidence in how you create. And to me, it's one of the most fun ones when you kind of can get yourself through this idea that everything has to look good all of the time. So here's an example of what typically happens. Maybe you've shown up in your studio and you've made yourself comfortable. Maybe you've flipped through your sketchbook or taken another look at your reference, adjusted your paintbrushes, or rearranged the tubes of paint that are sitting there on your table. And now, finally, you are painting. And let's just say that you've been trying something new. Maybe it's a looser style, a new subject, a bigger canvas, a new take on idea that you've been playing around with before. But this is the stage where you've laid things down and now you're looking at it and you're kind of like, what's next? What do I do now? Because it's not the painting that you want it to be, but you're also not at the very beginning of it either. So here's what's going on. You had an idea. You had a vision of what you wanted to create. And for some artists, that idea is an actual visual picture that you can see in your mind's eye. You see the colors, you see the shapes, you see the edges, you see the painting actually finished in your head. And that is what it looks like for you to have an idea. There's an actual image. Sometimes it's in color, sometimes it's in black and white. We all think a little bit differently. For other artists, it's not visual. It's more of just a feeling or an awareness. And it's really hard to describe because there are no words for it, which is why we're painting it. I usually fall right into this category. I have a much stronger awareness or knowing than a visual picture in my mind. Like, it's not like I close my eyes and I can see the painting finished. I just know what it is. And when I was doing my coach training and I was working on the concepts of coaching the unconscious mind and doing hypnosis work, it felt really weird to me that as an artist, I couldn't see anything. I thought I was supposed to have pictorial visions. Typically, what I see is the back of my eyelids. But when I relax and I go somewhere else, it's just a knowing. It's an awareness of how things are. And I thought it was really important to mention this because I know other people are like that. I totally didn't understand, but I just know that there are other people like that, and we tend to be more intuitive painters. So lots of times intuitive painters will say things like, well, I don't really start with a plan, so I don't know where things are going. And what I've come to learn is that that kind of means you don't see it in your head, but you know where you want to go. You just don't have that visual map. And so what they often say is, I don't start with a plan, so how do I even know where I am in this painting? from my experience with myself and working with hundreds and hundreds of artists at this point, I would say you do know. It just doesn't have a nameable shape or color until you put it down. From what I observe, we're all on a sort of spectrum with this. And I'd have to assume that those 2 points on the spectrum are likely not even the only 2 points. Like, for the purposes of this podcast episode, I'm just kind of naming, like, there's some people who see an actual visual picture and there's some people that have an awareness of it. But I think that the way all of our brains work, there's so much diversity in that other people, it's completely different. They're using different senses, or they just have different awarenesses of it. But regardless, you have an idea of what you want to create. And the messy middle, as I defined it, is a point in the painting where the reality of what is actually on the canvas is not what you had imagined. There is the idea of a mark, there is the idea of a brushstroke, and then there is the actual mark that you make. And the idea is what you would describe as quote unquote perfect. And it leads you in a very straight line to the obvious outcome, which is that idea that you had in your head. But we all know that in reality, we rarely, and I mean rarely, like probably 0.0000%, move through a painting in a straight line. It twists, it turns, we come at it sideways like a sailboat tacking back and forth on the wind. We're not going directly at it. So that part of your mind that believes that each mark leads perfectly, logically, and obviously into the next line, when that part of your mind sees what actually is on the canvas, it kind of freaks out a little bit. That is the messy middle. And that's why we call it the messy middle, is because we see it as a negative phase, the quote unquote ugly stage of the painting. I have a lot of artists who come into critique and they're like, oh, I'm at the ugly stage of the painting, or I'm in the messy middle. And I think a lot of us sort of like interpret that messy middle as this is just something that I have to endure. I have to suffer through this to get to the other side. And so when they label themselves as being in the messy middle, it's like, oh God, here we go. We're going to go through this like wild jungle, and this is going to be really, really a big challenge. And, it's not seen as something that is going to be enjoyable. I'm just going to call bullshit on that one. It's not a straight line, and it's not supposed to be a straight line. Instead, it's something surprising. It's something wild. It's something that doesn't yet make sense. It's not what you pictured, right? Because what you pictured was this perfect idea that you executed exactly in the way that would make it that exact vision. And so when you look at your canvas, or when you look at your sketchbook, or when you look at this image that you're making, and you don't see the straight line that leads you to that idea that you have, it can feel disorienting. It can feel uncomfortable, and it can feel slightly disturbing. And if there's one thing that our human brains do not like, it is discomfort caused by uncertainty. But this is where it gets interesting, I think, anyway, because this is you getting honest with your painting. You're not polishing, you're not performing, you're just showing up and letting the real you come out. And of course, your brain doesn't love that. So it starts throwing out thoughts like, this isn't working. What was I thinking? I should just go back to what I know. This is going to be too weird. All of that, right? All of that and more is what your brain is going to throw at you. Sorry, but you know what I mean, right? So that is what I call the experimenter's crisis, right? It's the messy middle, the ugly stage. It's when you are pushing yourself outside of your own comfort zone. And yeah, it's uncomfortable because of that expectation that it should go into it in a straight line. Also because you're doing something that you've not done before. And so you don't know how this is going to actually turn out. Right? Anytime we try something new and challenge ourselves, it feels a little bit awkward and weird and uncertain and all of the things that our brain typically doesn't like. So when your work looks different than what you imagined, it's really, really easy to make it mean that something is wrong. Something has gone terribly wrong. And we add in even more thoughts like, oh my God, I'm not progressing, or I'm getting worse. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, or I've lost my touch. But when your work looks bad, it usually means you're right where you need to be. You're stretching, you're breaking old patterns, you're trying something you don't already know how to do. Now, I can hear some of you screaming already, right? Because whenever I say something like that, the internet comes back at me with like, are you saying that you should just make bad art and that's okay? No, I'm saying that there are points in your painting where it looks bad to you because it's not exactly what you wanted it to be. It's not how you thought it should be, right? When you're pushing your boundaries, this is going to happen because you're trying something that you don't already know how to do. You're painting your way through it, and you don't have the safety net of having done it before, which allows you to sort of know what to expect. So, of course, you feel slightly uncomfortable. This is where there is some cognitive dissonance, and it's wreaking havoc on your beautiful, lovely painting day. So there's that old thought, which is something like, a real artist knows what to do. I should know what to do next. If I were a good enough painter, I would know. So here is the fundamental belief that in some way, shape, or form, a lot of us, I think most of us have, which is I should know what I'm doing. And if I don't know what I'm doing, then am I even a real artist? And it starts to threaten your sense of identity. So now, here's the contradiction. You are purposely doing something that you've never done before. You actually don't know what you're doing. So you freeze. Maybe you clean off your palette. Maybe you go pick another playlist. Maybe you go get a snack or walk the dog, but you do something to distract yourself from this cognitive dissonance of, I'm supposed to know. You've got these two warring thoughts. One of them is, I should know what I'm doing at all times. And when I say it out loud, I know it sounds ridiculous. I should know what I'm doing. And then there's this other idea that I want to do something new. I want to do something fun. I want to do something that I've never done before. So you see how those two contradict each other? The feeling that creates is really uncomfortable. I'm supposed to know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. And when you're not even aware of these two ideas colliding, the impact is profoundly disorienting. And typically, we respond with fear when we don't understand why things feel disoriented. We've been trained to believe that we are supposed to have the answers. We're supposed to know what to do. Otherwise, we're not professional. Now that we're all adulting, we're supposed to know what's going on. And I keep thinking, like, have you ever watched someone squirming and try to come up with a logical explanation, and they're doing all sorts of mental gymnastics to come up with an answer to something when the truth is they just don't know? But it's really hard for us to say, I don't know, because in our society, not knowing an answer to something is often equated with a lack of intelligence, being uneducated, being stupid, being unaware, being backwards, a failure, etc., etc. So long story short, we instinctively avoid and dislike not knowing. And some of us were even punished for not knowing. So then for some of us, there is an even extra aversion to saying, I don't know, or to admitting to ourselves, or being in a situation where you just don't know. And an association that is attached to that is something bad is going to happen because I don't know. Even if you're not aware of it, right? Even though, typically those aren't thoughts that you're sitting there thinking. It's just that feeling. But the truth is that there are many things that you don't know. And you're not supposed to know everything, even about art. And that's okay. Let me say that again, because I know it's Captain Obvious here, but at the same time, We think that because I've declared I'm an artist that now we're supposed to know everything. You're not supposed to know everything. You can't know everything, even about art, and that's okay. Now, I know when I pointed out to you like that, logically, I know that you see it. And some of you may be thinking, well, yeah, of course, right? And some of you might even be thinking, well, duh, I already knew that. But that unconscious belief that we should know the answer and that not having the answer means something negative gets generalized in our unconscious, which means that it may have started out as a belief about a very specific situation or a very specific context, but now it's understood to mean anytime, anywhere, and that belief is not even verbalized. It's just there and it's sitting underneath everything. It's coloring everything that is layered on top of it. And then here we are, trying to be creative, trying to be innovative, trying to learn something new. All situations where we don't know the exact answer because we couldn't possibly know the answer because the answer, in quotation marks, is in the completion of the painting that we're not even finished with yet. But there's that part of us that is convinced that we should know it and that something bad is coming because we don't know it. See how contradictory that is? It's actually impossible to have an answer at that stage. You haven't invented it yet. It doesn't exist yet. And sometimes there is no answer, which really freaks your brain out, like almost on an existential level. So, anywho, all of that to say that what you do every day in your studio can be really wildly uncomfortable when you're not clocking a lot of this, right? Which, nobody ever taught us how to clock these things, or nobody ever even pointed these things out most of the time, right? So do you see now why that messy middle that we get into sometimes feels absolutely unbearable? But if you let go of the idea that you should have an answer, that maybe you don't even need an answer, then the messy middle loses all of that significance that it used to have. And now it's just a question mark, like a kind question mark, an invitation. What do you want to do next? Where shall we go now? Your painting doesn't have a single resolution that makes all the other resolutions wrong. There are infinite possibilities and all of them are right. So now with this invitation, let's play. If we know that there are infinite possibilities and all of them are right, let's go play. Let's explore. Let's see what wild and beautiful thing you'll paint starting from right here, right now, exactly where your painting currently is. Whether it's your first brush stroke or the 651st stroke, you are exactly where you need to be. And if it feels uncomfortable, it's because you're stretching. You're breaking old patterns. You're trying something that you don't already know how to do. That's not failure. That's the process. This is what it looks like when you experiment. This is what it looks like when you stop copying what's safe and you start getting to know your own voice. Not the one that pleases other people. Not the one that has been trained to fit in and to do what people expect and to repeat what is already comfortable. The real one. The one that surprises even you sometimes. That's the artist that we all want to meet. And the only way to meet that artist is to keep painting. Growth isn't what happens after you figure the painting out. It's what happens during the process. It's what happens while you are figuring the painting out. It's what happens when you keep showing up even though you don't have a resolution yet. Even when you're not sure what is going to happen next. And hence, you find out by doing it. You are what makes the next thing happen. When you meet that mess, in air quotes, not with panic, but with compassion, when you let the ego freak out knowing that you are okay and you still choose to stay with that painting, that's not weakness, that's strength because you create your own safety. That's the moment most people quit, and the reason that you won't, because you can be onto yourself and you can decide who you want to be inside your own studio. So this is the part that we practice deliberately. Inside Growth Studio, we're talking about these types of topics all the time. So it's not just something that happens to you. It's something that you learn to use on purpose and with intention. It's the moment where your ideas stop living in your head and they start moving through your hands and they come alive on your canvas. That shift, that movement from thinking about how this painting is going to be to actually to making that painting and being with it in all the moments of it is the most courageous part, because you're not just making paintings, you're making decisions. And when you put yourself in this place where you're wanting to create something that is authentically yours, something that feels meaningful, something that most of the time you've never done before, right? When you start a new painting, when you start a new series, you're experimenting with your ideas. You're figuring it out as you put the brush to canvas. You're not supposed to know before you do the thing. And every time you put that brush to canvas, or every time you make a mark, however you're making it, whether you're using a brush or not, you're not just making marks. You're not just making paintings. You're making decisions. 100 little tiny decisions without knowing how they're going to turn out. That's what experimentation is. It's creating while staying curious. It's making art. It's making something that hasn't been made before without clutching for certainty. This is where your voice gets built. Not in theory, but in action. The action that you take inside of your studio when you paint your way through. And nobody else can do it for you. That's what makes it so powerful. That's what makes it so you. So when you're in the thick of it, don't pull back. Don't try to make it prettier. Make it truer. Ask yourself, what was I reaching for here? What felt alive? Even if it didn't land exactly precisely how I imagined it would be. One more layer, one more bold mark, one more curious mark. That's how you find the thread. That's how your work starts to sound like you. So try thinking of your studio time like a lab. You're not producing, you're investigating, you're gathering data, you're building trust with the work and with yourself. That's what this experimental phase is all about. This is where things get real. Every artist I work with hits this phase, and the ones who grow the fastest, they're the ones who give themselves permission to make 20 versions no one ever sees, because that's how the good stuff shows up. So that's what I like to practice with the artists inside of Growth Studio. I don't just give critiques. It's not just advice. It's actual practice, a space where you can make work without performing. And we don't avoid the messy middle. We don't avoid that phase. We lean into it on purpose with experiments, with support, with critique, and a community that gets it, because the messy middle isn't something to hide. It's something to practice and get good at and start to enjoy it. So if you're tired of quitting halfway through or holding back because you're afraid it won't be good enough, you got to come join us. We make brave, messy, honest work here, and we get better together. So after last week's episode on resistance, I wanted to say I got a comment from Michelle on Instagram, and she asked, what about the I can't finish this painting because I don't know what to do next? Or maybe it's done and the painting hasn't told me yet. Do either of these fit in here? I think these fit in the experimental phase. So here's a question for you, Michelle. What happens when you let go of the idea that there is a right answer or that you should know it, and instead you approach these paintings with curiosity and you allow yourself to approach that question, that painting, as an experiment? And here's the hardest part about doing that. You can't allow yourself for 1 second to leap to the conclusion that no right answer means doing it wrong. or that if everything is right, and if you give up on the idea that there is a right answer, the only possible result is that you'll just slap up anything and call it art. That is a very typical knee-jerk reaction that our brains give when we say no right answer. There are an infinite number of ways to resolve the painting so that it communicates your idea. It's like if you're in New Jersey and you want to get to Montreal, you could fly, you could drive, you could take trains. And if you add up all of the different flight possibilities, including multiple stops and even one that takes you through New Orleans for whatever reason, and you add up all of the different driving routes and all of the different train possibilities and all of the combinations of driving and trains or driving and flights or driving and trains and flights, like taking all three of those as a way to get to Montreal, they still will all get you to Montreal. And some people will say that the best route, aka the right route, is the fastest. And some people will say that the best route, the right route, is the cheapest. Some people will say that the best route is the least stressful. And other people will say the best route is the most scenic. And maybe a few of us will say that the best route is the most magical one because it took you through New Orleans and that inspired a breathtaking new thing. But they still all end up in Montreal. So I know Michelle. She is a beautiful person and a wonderful painter. And I also know that when she says, I can't finish this painting because it's a sentence we've all at least thought, right? I know you're all familiar with this. And it's also a lie. Release the lie and you'll finish the painting. You might even say that the painting finishes itself. I don't know. Sometimes it just does. Okay, I'm going to end this here. That's what I have for you today. Thanks so much for listening. Next week, we're going to move into the next phase of the Create Spiral with alignment, what it means when your work starts to feel like you. All right, have an amazing week, and I will talk to you soon.